Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is attending the Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia for the first time since its country was suspended from the organization in 2011. The suspension came amid Syria's brutal crackdown on protests and ensuing civil war. And this comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Jeddah earlier this morning to attend the Arab League summit. In a tweet, Zelensky said he hopes to enhance bilateral relations between Ukraine and the Arab world. So joining me now to discuss Syria's readmission to the Arab League is Stephen Cook. He's a senior fellow for Middle East and Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Thanks so much for joining us. So let's talk about this readmission. You know, what does it mean for Syria? What does it mean in general?
Yeah, it's a great question. For Syria, it means the possibility that this war will finally come to an end and that this suffering will end and that a reconstruction of the country will begin. More broadly, from the Arab perspective, it's a way to pull the Syrians away from Iran, which has been supporting Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian regime almost from the very beginning of this uprising that turned into a civil war. And then finally, I think leaders in the region, specifically Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, the president of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed, want to shape the region for the Arab world for themselves, rather than have Americans, Chinese, or Russians do it. And one of the ways in which they're going to do it is by bringing Assad in from the cold. Syria is a very important Arab country. They're doing this over the objection of their strategic partner, the United States. So there's a lot that's going on here that the Arabs believe that they can settle this conflict, push the Iranians away, as well as shape the Middle East for themselves.
What is the messaging to Bashar al-Assad, though? Here is, a man obviously accused of thwarting any efforts towards democracy, attacking his own people, possibly using chemicals. I mean, is the message sort of, if you wait long enough, don't worry, you'll be accepted back into the family?
I think that is. It's rather extraordinary. Bashar al-Assad is a war criminal. He has killed in excess of 300,000 people, made more than half of his population either internally displaced people or refugees around the world. I think that in the thinking of Arab leaders, they can bring this horrible episode to an end by bringing Bashar back into the Arab fold. It does send a terrible, terrible message to other dictators around the world that if they hold out, if they win, they can get away with heinous crimes against humanity.
And so why is the U.S. taking the approach that it's taking, a policy of, isolation and pressure against Assad, but not overtly saying to its other allies in the region, this isn't a good idea?
I think there's a couple reasons here. First, the United States really can't do anything about it. We're not prepared to use any form of leverage with the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, and others. Second, the United States is engaged in what's now have been defined in Washington as a global struggle against the Chinese and the Russians. And if the United States really put the pressure on its strategic partners in the Middle East, it might drive them further into the arms of the Russians and the Chinese. And the Biden administration would like to be very careful about that. And it does, in a very cynical way, raise the prospect of finally bringing this terrible civil war to an end.
Yeah, I mean, I know you said that a couple of times about bringing it to an end, and I just think about all these Syrians in exile who will never be able to come back home. And I also thought when we were saying that Volodymyr Zelensky is also going to be there, and I'm sure there are a lot of awkward meetings, but I thought, what an awkward meeting should Zelensky and Assad meet? Because, I mean, part of the reason that this war has dragged on the way it has is because Russia stepped in and bolstered, Assad's position.
Right.
Am I wrong in saying this seems sort of like an awkward place for Zelensky to go to?
I suspect that Volodymyr Zelensky and Bashar al-Assad their paths will not cross. But you're absolutely right. This is one of the great contradictions that the Arab leaders have put themselves in. They want to demonstrate some measure of solidarity with Zelensky while at the same time bringing Assad, who is a patron of Vladimir Putin, who's a client, I should say, of Vladimir Putin.
Right.
It is rather extraordinary, but they believe that they can manage this in a way that they can accrue both the benefits that they perceive of bringing Assad in, as well as signaling to the United States that they are on board with the fight against Russia's aggression in Ukraine. This isn't the first time that in the Middle East there have been these kind of stunning ironies happening all at the same time. But I think the important thing to understand here is that Arab leaders are taking a stand to shape the region for themselves. They are finished with the United States, Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, Israel trying to shape the region for themselves. They're taking matters into their own hands.
Fascinating. Great talking to you, Stephen A. Cook. Thank you.
My pleasure.